Hi, I'm Burke MacDonald with Schaumburg Heartbeat. We're over at the Schaumburg Township District Library today, and we're going to discuss a little bit about people's past and history, genealogy. I'm with Tony Kierna, and you're the librarian in charge of this area, right?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Burke, for being here.
Well, and
welcome.
thank you for taking the time to talk with us this morning.
Glad to do it.
Well, Tony, this sounds like quite an involved topic, but we're going to try and keep it brief for people that are just trying to figure out how to get started. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because it's the easy things up front when you start doing this that helps you get through the entire process. If you make it way too complicated early on, you will probably be very frustrating and you'll probably start giving up on the process.
So how do you start then?
Well, basically, we all start with our own family stories. That's basically the best way that you can go about the process in doing this. It's as simple as, who am I? Where did I come from? Sometimes what we find in life is that as we age, this is where we start asking ourselves these basic questions that 20, 30, 40 years previously we could have been asking, but we never did because life was more important for other aspects at that time. But basically you do want to just start with, who am I? Where did I come from? Well, you know that you came from a mother and a father. You may even have siblings. You have grandparents. You may not know them. They may not be around. But this is where you start capturing from those who are currently alive and currently, hopefully, family members, this information of where were we living 25 years ago and stuff like that. Because as you start doing this research on yourself, the geographic locations of your history and your family's history going back in time become very important, because at some point you're going to be tying in the geographic locations of your origins to where the records are.
Right.
And then you're going to start matching the two together to make that story a legitimate story, to make a factual story.
Well, this seems like it could be quite a bit of fun if you're sitting down with an aunt or an uncle, grandma, grandpa, whatever it is, mom and dad. You start asking some questions, and you start finding out things that you probably never knew, right?
Oh, they're surprising things that you discover along the process of getting the information. And sometimes the information that you're hearing is so out of the norm or expectation for yourself that you may want to start challenging some of what is being said to you.
I guess that's one of my questions is, these family stories get all involved, and as you start telling the story when you're little, you pass the story around the table and it all changes.
Yep.
How much of the stories that you're hearing with your relatives are probably fact, and how much is embellishment from having a good time making the story better and better?
Believe it or not, I would say from my own experience and from a lot of the experiences that people have shared with me, you often get a kernel of truth in almost every story, but it's the embellishments that you have to weed your way through to get to the actual facts and stuff like that. To give you an example, what we've often heard told and what we want to believe sometimes is these stories that my ancestor came to Ellis Island and they were stowaways on the boat. That's one thing.
Stowaways?
I've heard that. People like that kind of a story, where in reality, the likelihood of something like that happening is absolutely minimal.
Right.
The other thing that we often will hear is that our ancestors, they came into Ellis Island and whatever, and they came in as a Kowalski, and they left going out of Ellis Island with a name like Smith or something like that, because that's another nice, interesting story. But the reality of some of these things, that has all been, it's been a myth basically, and it's been proven that at the time when Ellis Island was in its heyday of activity, millions of people coming in, that it was staffed by I think at least over 100 languages worth of interpreters that they had at the time. So there was always a way to get an interpreter, that you needed to match a new immigrant, get the correct information, and then they could go on their way.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you might do to get started here. One of the things you offer once a month, you have a program here, right?
That's
where people, and obviously the program's going to be somewhat involved some months and others not as involved. But for a beginner, it's a good place to come and at least talk with other people and get some ideas, right?
The world of genealogy and those who pursue genealogy are some of the friendliest, sharing people that you will find. So when you think that you're brand new to something, like most of us are when we try something new, we're sort of lost. And we don't want to look bad in the process. But when you're actually open and looking for help, and genealogists will offer that help to get you started down the right path of your research efforts. But we do have a monthly program, as you indicated, Burke. We meet on the second Tuesday evening of every month here at our main library. And we start the program at 7:30, and we last usually till about 9:30 when we have to actually start closing down as the library approaches the time when it closes and stuff.
And some of these programs, you actually tape them so that, and then you put those into the library over into the stacks, so people can maybe look at something that they had some interest in, but maybe they weren't able to attend that meeting.
Right, that's correct. And what we do is when we have our programs, we have a variety of programs throughout the year. Actually, we have programs that are offered where we have speakers giving a presentation on an important genealogical topic, and then we have programs where we break out the room by areas of ethnic interest, such as we'll have a table set up where those who are interested in doing Irish research, they gather together and they work with each other to help each other through the process. But we'll have Irish and German and Polish and Czech and Italian, Scandinavian, and then the most important thing is, like you mentioned earlier, for those who are beginners, we actually have a beginner's table that I lead and help people through the process.
That sounds like a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you also have a blog. If you go onto the Schaumburg Township Library site and you go to services and genealogy,
Correct.
Your blog is right there at the top, right?
Correct. And the blog serves the purpose of me sharing to the community bits and pieces of genealogical information. Our own upcoming programs will publicize. We'll publicize programs for other libraries, because for those who are doing research, we offer certain things, but there is so much out there available on different topics that libraries have different speakers on, that it's good to share that information so they can go elsewhere if they need to.
You know, I happened to look at your blog this month, and it was really sort of interesting, because that first question that we talked about is, well, how do you start? You did mention that if you're doing this in a way where you're really thinking of trying to start putting it down, that when you're meeting with, say, your aunt, your uncle, grandpa, that maybe you should jot down some questions so that, because the fun of this is that you start hearing these stories and you get all involved in the story and miss some of the basic stuff that you need to really have, like where they were born and how old they were, and you know.
Well, again, there's often a high level of excitement if you're doing this for the first time, and you want to capture as much as you can. But if you come in an unprepared manner where you think you're going to start talking, just, you know, all your questions are up in your mind, I will guarantee you that as soon as you start hearing that person tell you something, they're going to segue off into another part of a story, and pretty soon you're going to follow suit with that and ask more questions about that. But in the meantime, the real questions that you had presented here that you wanted, they sort of stand there unused and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, and it makes sense, but on the other hand, the stories, life is a series of stories, and really the fun part is listening to these stories and hearing what grandma says or what grandpa says or uncle says, and sometimes you probably hear things about your family that you may not want to know, but it's fun to hear.
That's also true in the process, and I would suggest to anybody interested in doing genealogical research on their families that I would say over the long haul of their research, they are definitely going to find not only the good stuff, which is the good fun stuff, the high parts of their family, but it's likely that as they dig deeper and deeper and across a broad base of ancestors, you're going to find the stories of them that aren't maybe so good and stuff like that.
Well, we're at the library, and I guess what we ought to do is go to the parts of the library that we're going to be needing to do some of this stuff with.
Sure.
So should we go out to the books and start there?
That's a good place to start. Obviously, the first place, as we talk now, is you got to get those stories, and you got to get them from the people who are available to you now before they pass away. But once you've got those stories, My recommendation is that, yes, get to some basic book material, still read up on the process, because a lot of the
Well,
introductory
let's
books.
go over to that section
All right, let's
and
do
see
it.
what we have over there.
All right.
My name is Cooper, and I take time for fun by playing dodgeball.
WSPD, your place to take time for fun.
I think we have a terrific team of trainers. We all sort of excel in different areas. You need to be paired up with someone who works well with what you need. I would hope that people would want to come to me because of the personal attention that I give each and every one of my clients. I will give you everything I have to make sure that you can accomplish what your goal is. It's a priceless moment that I relish.
Okay, we're over in the, well, I guess I used to call them stacks when I was young.
Yep,
What do you
yep,
still call
yep,
them?
I call them stacks.
Okay, this is an example of a book, Give Your Family a Gift That Money Can't Buy. And you have another one over here on Puzzling Your Past. These are basically beginner books that tell
Right.
you what types of things.
Right. Well, they're going to give you sort of a nice roadmap. Just like we talked about earlier, where you're going to be talking to people and gathering information that way. These books here in general are going to give you some exposure then of what you're going to start doing with that material and how to go about finding more detailed information and so on and so forth.
Now, some of them get down to specific ethnic groups, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
the Irish
Yeah.
and the Polish and so on and so forth.
Yeah, you're generally going to find, I would say, a lot of good introductory book material, but then as the researcher themselves becomes more adept at researching and just more experienced, and let's say that they are going to be doing deeper research on their Polish ethnicity or something like that. Yeah, you're going to find books specific to the ethnicity because those books are going to share with the reader the process of how to go about pursuing further records, because ultimately the search is going to be for records to prove out those stories that we talked about.
And these records are there's places where you can actually go and find these records?
Well, again, if we roll back the clock years ago, the way that it was done is that a lot of researchers, this was hands-on work, going to facilities that had these records and stuff and asking and getting copies of these records for your own individual use. What has changed so dramatically over the most recent 10, 15 years with the internet and with genealogical research is more and more of the data that was in paper format that we were digging into before and making trips to get, that's all available at our fingertips through a lot of the databases that exist out there.
We're going to go over and show a little bit of a database in a minute. But so these are books that basically are here to give you some understanding of what types of things you should be looking for and where maybe you could go to find some of this material?
Right, right. It'll give you archives and other pieces of information where materials exist that could be of help to you. But again, some of that stuff is being transitioned into the digital world today, which is making it more available at our fingertips.
But this is another reason to come to the meetings, right? Because if you come to the meetings, by sharing with each other, you can find out that maybe this person found something at this specific library that they never knew existed, right?
Exactly. Not only that, but it's just the sharing of that general information between researchers that all of a sudden one person gets that aha moment because somebody gave them that one tip of advice that they simply weren't aware of, and that allows them to pursue further, broaden their tree that they're researching, and make some great successes out of it.
Okay, well, let's leave this area. I feel sort of you're getting closed here on
I
these
know.
stats.
I do want to just add one more thing, Burke.
Yeah.
For those who want to come to this section, all of our genealogical materials are in the 929.1 through 929.3 area of our library, and we're currently in the circulating part of our collection, so these books are all available for the user to take out and check out. But we have other materials, genealogical materials, both in reference and even some downstairs in audio video.
Okay, and we're up on the second floor here too.
Correct.
Right? And the meetings generally take place here, but I would look at the front when you come in, because
Right,
the meetings
right.
change once in a
Right.
while.
I'd say 95% of our meetings are on the second floor in a specific room that we have, and we try and get them always scheduled over there.
Okay, well, let's go over
Sure.
and talk about databases.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, Tony, we're over by the database section. This
Mm-hmm.
basically the computers in the library, and there are certain ones that you have to talk to your Ask Me desk, right?
Right.
And then they will turn these on and help you to find the databases you're looking
Right,
for,
right.
right?
We're on the second floor still, and as Burke mentions here, we're talking about the reference computers behind the Ask Us desk. So the process would be, if you want to use these computers to access those genealogical databases that we offer, this is the spot to do it, but ask right at the Ask Us
Okay,
desk.
what type of databases are on here?
Pretty much, I would say, people who are watching television and see commercials, you're going to see Ancestry all over the screen for their advertisements. So they are one of the largest providers of databases out there. Then second in line, or
But that one you have to come to the library
Yes.
to use, right?
there's, for the most part, most of our databases are available to Schaumburg card holders from home through the use of their library card and their PIN number. They can get access to doing it that way. But some of the databases that we do offer for genealogy, they do have license restrictions on it, which means that we can use a database, but we can purchase a database and it can be used, but only on site.
Okay, one of them I know, because I went out and looked at this ahead of time. It's called Folio. What's the type of things that you find in that type
You mean Fold 3, I think it might have
Fold
been?
3,
Yeah.
right.
That one's often designated more for a lot of military record information. That is, and again, one of the subsets of information that a lot of researchers are digging into once they discover a story that perhaps a grandfather was in World War I. Or even if they're luckier, a great-grandfather was in the Civil War and stuff like that. So there's a lot of that kind of records that are in there, but it's not just exclusively military records.
Okay, and then there's a couple other databases that have similar type of information, but in a more general type of way, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have what's a database we have called American Ancestors. For those of you who are doing New England colonial American research, a lot of the database information in that particular one will help you unfold the mysteries about your colonial ancestor and stuff like that.
Now, I know some people like to get right down to the basis of it, and almost every county in the United States, right, or state, it depends on how it's organized. In Illinois, it's by county. You can go down to Cook County and get the actual a copy of a birth certificate or a marriage certificate and so on and so forth, right?
Correct. And I mean, that even Cook County has gotten on the digital bandwagon, so to speak, because where you used to have to make a trip downtown to Chicago to the archives down there, today through a website that they have out there available, you can actually do your searching for birth, marriage, and death certificates within the parameters that they allow for years having passed since the event occurred. And at that point, just take out your credit card and you'll be able to actually submit that for payment, and you'll be getting your digital image.
And I know we're lucky, we have a church right down the street here on Schaumburg Road. Isn't the Church of the Latter-day Saints, right?
Correct.
And they have probably the most inclusive records in
Right.
the whole United States. And you can work with them if you're trying to find records that maybe you have some problems with.
Right. I would say, for those of you doing research who are new, you're hearing a lot about Ancestry. But before Ancestry, there were the Mormons, or what they're known as officially as the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. And they've been big into doing genealogy way before it entered the digital world. So there is what we call a family history center. There's a Mormon church. Within that church here on Schaumburg Road, they do have a family history center. today it may not be as critically important as what it was years ago, because years ago they were a hotbed for where you get your microfilms. But since so much of that is being digitized, microfilms, they play an important role, but I don't think as many people go to that facility to get microfilms much anymore. They should, because if they only think of digital records, they're leaving a lot on the table that is still in microfilm format that has not been digitized. So even the stories, and even as a researcher, when you uncover this, you're going to constantly find information that is still not exactly right and stuff like that. But by corroborating with other documents, he became a citizen. So when did he become a citizen? What was reported there on how long he's been in the United States? You sort of have to be a detective in this whole process and uncover the parts and then put them together for yourself. And still, if you don't have it documented, you have to note that, because a lot of us just like those stories, and all of a sudden myth becomes fact.
Right, and when you start putting these things together, you can put them down on paper and take a screenshot. A good example of this, I have relatives that were in the Iroquois fire, where most of the fire codes today have been changed because of that, because at that time the doors opened in. Now in public places, doors have to open out. But I went back to the records of the Chicago Tribune and the papers at that time, and were actually able to find some good stories of what happened at the time, and also the names of the relatives, you know, that were in the fire, and to document the fact that that was a true story that happened. And you can do that on many of the historical things that are done since newspapers have been archived and so on, right?
And again, it's the newspapers, which is a wonderful source. I'm glad you even brought that up, Burke, because digital newspapers are a big thing today, and what makes it so much easier is that, again, like with the databases that we were talking about, they're searchable. So you don't have to actually physically read a newspaper in the old-fashioned way as research occurred. Today you enter in your search terms, hopefully that they're good enough to extract the information from you, and then you'll probably link that to an image of the actual newspaper page, and so now you can spend some time doing a lot of reading on it.
Okay, so this has been really exciting, but let's remind people of, you have a monthly meeting.
Yes,
when
we
can
do.
people come to these meetings?
Second Tuesday of every month, and it's throughout the whole year. So we do that, and we start the program at 7:30. We have a mixture over a year's period of time of having speaker programs on different genealogical topics, and then on a quarterly basis in the months of March, June, September, and December, we have our program, but that's the night where we do the breakout groups, and I have the beginners group.
But you should just come to a meeting and you'll give them a nice welcome package with at least what's available in the library of the things that you can do, and give you a little bit of a start for the whole thing.
Right, right.
Hopefully the library will like this segment and capture it and put it out on the shelf that people can see a good basic way to start this research also, right?
Right, I agree. And again, if there's nothing else further I could say sometimes is that get those stories, get them before those people who have those stories are no longer available to us. And sometimes with the stories, do your research on that. Don't necessarily jump in immediately into doing searching. Build that foundation of your research that is the facts, and those facts will lead you to other facts, and you'll build the stories.
Well, and the other thing, now I know that technology keeps moving along. We had things called 8-tracks that people probably don't even know what we're talking about anymore. But I would also probably encourage people, you've got cell phones now, you've got cameras now, you've got recorders now, is get grandma and grandpa while you can still talk to them, and they can understand what you're doing, and get them to tell their story.
Yep. I recommend when somebody does try and capture the information from an ancestor, from a living relative, it's not, again, just don't sit with them and just talk and you listen and then you're going to be taking notes on it later. Sometimes the best thing to do is, with their permission, just get a camera in front of them, video record the process, let them talk, do your questions, and then after you're done, you've now got that on tape or on digital media that in the future you can go back to should they no longer be available. You'll be able to start putting the pieces together from that original story.
Well, Tony, thank you very much.
Burke,
It's been
thank you
a
for
fun
coming.
morning over here. They make us work hard when we get to the library. We had to get here early in the morning before the library opened, but it's been a fun time. Hopefully you'll have enjoyed the segment. And I'm Burke MacDonald with Schaumburg Heartbeat, and don't forget, take time for fun.